Hello, welcome back to my channel. I am Sydney Mercer, and this is Content I Should Have Learned. Today we are going to learn, we're going to actually not even learn, we're going to unlearn a little bit about one of our illustrious founding fathers, George Washington. I've decided first I'm going to go over the colonized version of George Washington, all of the information we've all probably heard about him and were taught about him in school. And then we'll switch gears and we'll examine just how much history was cut out of our history books in relation to this human. Colonized version. What you probably already know about George Washington, all the stories that you've heard, are how he chopped down a cherry tree and then was confronted about it and just was so honorable and so inherently good. He couldn't lie, and he had to admit that he chopped down a cherry tree without permission. And also, of course, we know he was one of the first to insist on presidential terms only being 4 years long because we were trying to break free of the ruling state of kings and queens. So he said he was only going to be president for 4-year term limit. And he was really a founding father of our modern democracy. Hooray, hooray, hooray. What's not to love, am I right? Let's decolonize. Switching gears for a second, I am the proud owner of this book called 111 Places in Baltimore That You Must Not Miss. And pre-pandemic, I was slowly working my way through all of the amazing places around Baltimore in this book because long story short, realized that you don't really explore your own city with the same vigor and the same fervor that you will often explore cities that you're vacationing in and that you're only visiting. So I decided to explore my own city with the same amount of enthusiasm. And I was flipping through the pages, and one of the things you must not miss, it says in here on page 41, is George Washington's teeth. Fun fact, we have it right here in Maryland at the National Museum of Dentistry. We have one of the last remaining sets of his dentures. He had several sets throughout his life, and I believe there's only one set left that's still a complete set of dentures, and it's here in Maryland at the Museum of Dentistry. And I was reading about it, and there was a passage in here that hit my ear a little weird and tripped me up. So let me read you the part that caused me to do an episode on good old George. Washington had several sets of dentures made for him, but not a single one was made from wood. The first set was made from actual human teeth, likely from slaves he had purchased from his Mount Vernon estate. Let's read that one more time. Maybe I read that wrong. Washington had several sets of dentures made for him, but not a single one was made from wood. The first set was made from actual human teeth, likely from the slaves he had purchased for his Mount Vernon estate. I don't remember that coming up in school. Don't remember that being in any of the history books. That he was a slave owner is something that people don't talk about often. If they do, they only talk about how, he freed them. He freed the people that he enslaved. He freed them. He was good. He freed them in his will after he died. So he was very conscious of the fact that he needed enslaved people to run his estate. But after he was dead, he wouldn't really need them anymore. So yes, he went ahead and freed them in his will. But many died before he died, so they never got that chance for freedom. You see the problem there. So I decided to do a little research on that because this is something I'd never heard of until I was in my late 20s, looking at this book, reading through it, looking for something interesting to see, and there it is, right in that paragraph. So he pulled the teeth of enslaved people and had dentures made for himself. Pause. Does that discredit everything he's done in his life? Because he owned enslaved people and because he pulled their teeth for his own benefit? Personal question. Personally, I don't think it invalidates everything that he's ever done, but I think it's an interesting piece to cut out of the history books, and it's an interesting narrative to refuse to explore in schools. Because I've thought about this a lot, and at the end of the day, I think we fall into these tropes like it's a movie or something where there has to be a good person and a bad person, a hero and a villain, and that's it. Either you're all good or you're all bad. And that's a bad message for kids in so many ways. Because if we are told, like many of us were taught, George Washington was this perfect human, incredible man ahead of his time, freed the enslaved people. We need to say enslaved people as well, to digress for a moment. It's not slaves. Slaves are not who they were. That was a position they were put into. They became enslaved. That's why I'm using that word. So, he freed the enslaved people. Yeah, he did, but he also did bad things. So sometimes people do good things, sometimes people do bad things. And guess what? Those people are often the same person. I mean, imagine if we were all held to that standard. Either you're a hero or a villain. If you had to pick one, a lot of us would fall in the villain category because we've all done things that we're not proud of. We've all done things that we're embarrassed of or that we wish we could take back. So it doesn't make us villains just because we've done maybe some villainous things. But it also doesn't make us heroes because we've done some heroic things. So yes, you were a founder of modern democracy, but that doesn't mean you were not a brutal slave owner at the same time. Because guess what? History is filled with people, and people are flawed. And we always tell kids, we talk out of both sides of our mouths with kids. We tell them no one's perfect, except this weird subset of people that kind of are and have never made a mistake, because we're just going to cut all the mistakes out and only tell you about their successes. That's ridiculous and frustrating and exhausting. My favorite thing in the world is when people who are really successful talk about the journey that they took to get to their success and how hard it was for them at the beginning and the difficult choices that they had to make, because that's something I can relate to. I can feel that. I can understand that. And kids are the same way. I think that we've fallen into this trap of just sorting people into these two categories where either you're heroic and honorable George Washington or you're the evil monster that is, a true slave owner that was mean to the slaves. There's that trope of good and bad owners of enslaved people when it's not that simple. It's not that simple. It was wrong to own people as property. I don't think any of us are debating that. But does that mean we would throw out our entire system of government, our democracy, our term limits? Let me tell you, just side note again, I've never been happier for term limits than I am leading up to this next election. She's political. Yeah, term limits are wonderful. So that's not something I would ever get rid of, even now that I've learned that the person who came up with that and who promoted that idea was a brutal owner of enslaved people and pulled their teeth out to make himself dentures because he saw them as less than human. So what's the problem with ripping their teeth out? We have to move away from this narrative of good and bad, right and wrong. Yes, we need to teach children that there are societally acceptable ways to behave and unacceptable ways to behave, and there are laws and rules in place for a reason, but we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just because someone has done bad things, all of us, doesn't mean we throw out the good too. But it doesn't harm, in my mind, someone's legacy, which is also another interesting word, an interesting thought process, but it doesn't harm someone's entire legacy and all the wonderful things that they've done just because they've also done awful things. I think it's a great thing to teach kids. So that's why I think it's so important to decolonize this curriculum and tell the whole story. Yes, George Washington did some great things for this country, and some things that we still do today are based on his influence. Part of the story. When we tell the whole thing and bring it full circle, though, he did some pretty messed up stuff and some pretty dark things. To me, that says to kids, you could have made mistakes in your life, but that doesn't mean you'll never do anything good or anything wonderful. And I think it's important that we let kids know that everyone has made mistakes, even people that you might idolize or that you have been taught to idolize have done terrible things. My humble opinion, that's content you should have learned. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel if you find all of this stuff interesting, and comment below with something you did not learn in school between K and 12th grade, you may have learned in college, grad school, or after, that you really think you should have learned, is content you should have learned in that K through 12 time frame, or that you feel like you would have benefited from learning in that K through 12 time frame, because that's what this channel is all about. It's about decolonizing curriculum and opening people's minds up to think a little bit bigger than what we were taught in school. So please comment below if you have something that you'd like for me to cover.